Hello, everybody, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Wednesday, the 1st of October, this beautiful year of 2025. I don't know about you, but fall is my favorite time of year. And this past week and a half ago, I spent from Saturday the 20th to Sunday the 28th bebopping around the midpoint of our province and a little bit further north. So between the 53rd and 55th parallel, which is pretty far north, generally speaking. And it was incredible to see fall coming into its own and the differences in the world that we live in. So as we drove north of Brandon through Minnedosa and up to Riding Mountain National Park, we drove through farmland and beautiful green trees, some of them beginning to turn for the fall. And this was on this Saturday, the 20th, when we were driving up. And we saw two bears in Riding Mountain National Park looking a little lethargic, hopefully getting themselves ready for hibernation in the winter. And we continued to drive, and we drove up to Swan River, and the leaves were changing a little bit more, and we moved, a little bit more farmland, some beehives and some cattle. And then we kept going north from Swan River up toward Mafeking and onto the Pas. And as you're driving, the farmland stops, and we start to see some scrub, some lower bushes and things like that. Lots of pine trees, places where there have been forest fires in years gone by, and the trees are beginning to grow again. And I just imagine the blueberries are fantastic in there as well. And we kept going. Then you get to the Canadian Shield, and it becomes a lot of rock. Not many deciduous trees. There's some, but not as many. Lots of tamarack, lots of spruce, lots of the evergreens that will stay put, looking almost not green, but almost black against the sky all throughout the winter. And then on Sunday, we drove to Snow Lake, and it's even further north. And as you go to Snow Lake, we notice the difference there as well, that the trees, the rock, and how different it was. Later on in the week, on Thursday, we went to Thompson, which is even further north than Snow Lake, and up past the 55th parallel. And it was like we'd actually entered into not the beginning of fall, like we had been in the Pas, but almost toward the end of fall, almost like we were waiting for winter to come as we just got further north. And indeed, on the Friday evening of the 26th, when we were at St. James the Apostle Church, I think it was, in Thompson, for the ordination of Dave Sanderson to the transitional diaconate, the heavens opened, the rain poured down, and leaves began falling off the trees because the wind was so strong. And in the morning, when we woke up to drive back to the Pas, it's about almost a 4-hour drive back to the Pas. So give you some sense, from Brandon to Thompson is about a 10-hour drive. So that's how far north we were. And got up in the morning, and it was chilly, and the sky was that dark steel gray that looks like when it's going to snow. And as we were driving south to go back to the Pas for a regional council meeting, the sun began to come out, and we noticed as we drove further south that the trees were more yellow, less leaves had fallen, until we sort of did the whole thing in reverse. We went from sort of winter weather back toward the beginning of fall. And it really, really brought to my mind the incredible intelligence in God's creativity, in the way that the sap moves through the trees with the frosts to dictate when the leaves will turn and when the leaves will fall off the trees, and they prepare themselves for winter rest. It made me think of the differences, because in Ontario, in Halifax, when we were there, at this time of year, the trees would be turning, but they wouldn't be turning yellow. They would be yellow, but there would also be different shades of green and brown and red and orange. And that's something I love where I live, but I really do miss the colors of autumn in Ontario, in southwestern Ontario and in Nova Scotia. But just thinking that every place we went, the decisions that God made in creation, the decisions God made in creating the science of horticulture, or whatever you would call this, arborist would know, that determines what changes the color of the leaves, and why do they change to one color and not another color. The ability of the tamarack to not lose its needles, but to turn yellow or orange and look like it's dying in the winter, but it's not. The incredible ability of those trees in those particular areas for those particular reasons to provide the ecosystem that those particular animals need to survive. And then thinking about the power of what was lived there before. Because on every road I went on, obviously it was paved this time around. Not always are they paved, but these ones were paved. And just thinking about back before society came in to start paving and using dynamite to blow out the rocks and create the roads, there were people there. It was not an empty land. There were people who watched the signs of the times, who looked to the color of the trees, to watch the animals to see what would happen next, for them to know what they would do next. The indigenous elders or peoples who would go out and set the trap lines that would feed them through the winter. The communities that would travel en masse from one gathering place to another because of the change of seasons. We need to come back to a place where we learn from the changing of seasons. There is something to be said about the natural rhythms of our world, of our lives, of our bodies, that we seem to have forgotten now that we have artificial light. We have the ability to go anywhere at any time, to get to a warmer climate when it gets too cold, rather than learning how to let our bodies acclimate to that colder climate and learn how to do that work. There's something to be said for the reality that in the winter we kind of slow down, and sometimes we're forced to slow down. You know, if you're a runner and you get up every morning at 6 a.m. and you know, go driving, or you know, go running every morning at 6 a.m., come home, have a shower, change your clothes, get into work by 8 o'clock, and you know, plow forward. Well, when there's 3 feet of snow on the ground, that slows us down. Do we go to the track on some, you know, the university or at the local gym? Do we get a treadmill for in the house? Or do we consider the ways that God has created the rhythm of our seasons to invite us to slow down? Our lights, it gets dark by 4:30 sometime where I am. By the time Christmas time rolls around, I will go to work in the dark and come home in the dark. And that is not necessarily an invitation for me just to turn all my lights on at home and work in my office for another several hours. Maybe it's God's way of saying to us, there are rhythms that I created for all of the creatures, including you, and you need to learn them to be healthy. Maybe we need to reclaim the rhythms that God created. And it seems to me that the 1st of October is a great time to do that, because today is really, for most of us, wherever we might be, the day we can really say, you know, autumn has begun. We have the chilly mornings, we have the frost mornings, we have the colored leaves and the leaves in the ground, flowers beginning to die, a natural death. The time has come that we pay attention. So as you go about your autumn, as you walk into your October, I invite you to think about the ways that you need to maintain a healthy balance in your life. And that may indeed include recognizing the need to take some time, to slow down, to acknowledge that when God has given us the gift of longer nights and shorter days, maybe we're to experience the gift of more rest and less hurry in preparation for the season when there will be more light and more time. Just some thoughts. Whatever you do today, I hope you take some time to take a rest, take a deep breath, go out and kick some leaves, appreciate these changing of the seasons. God bless, and I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel.